it's on now. This is Warren Vanderhill working on the Center for Middletown Studies project dealing with deindustrialization and economic development in Muncie. And today, February 27th, 2008, I'm interviewing Dave Heeter, the CEO of Mutual Federal Savings Bank, at his office in downtown Muncie. Dave, I want to begin by thanking you for your willingness to participate in our project. And I'd like to start out with a kind of general question and have you tell me what has been your involvement in Muncie area economic development. And here I'm really looking at a time frame. How long you've been involved in economic development, what some of your involvement has been.
My involvement has primarily been through my employer, Mutual Federal Savings Bank, and really started in earnest as I joined the chamber board, which would have been about 4 years ago. Now, I participated in various parts of economic development over the last 20 years, things like United Way, things like fundraising for the Vision and Horizon and Vision programs. But as far as being part of the formal process of economic development, it's really been in the last 4 years or so.
Okay. Let me just pick up on one point you mentioned, because it said this obviously has to do with your involvement with the bank. How would you describe the bank's involvement in economic development in Muncie?
Well, I think going all the way back, we're the oldest financial institution headquartered in Delaware County. So since 1889, we've played a role in commerce in Delaware County. Now, role in commerce probably can mean a whole lot of different things, but we have been members of the chamber for what seems probably like forever.
Yeah.
We have had various. And I think it's important maybe to make a distinction that I'll probably refer to the chamber a lot in economic development, only because for many years my perception is that the chamber's specific role was the promotion of business in the community. Now I think there are some differentiations to that over the last probably 20, 25 years as economic development became its own animal. But our company has had chairmans of the board of the chamber. I'm privileged to be the last or the most recent one, which I am now. But Gene Kern and Don Roberts, both predecessors of mine, were involved at the board level, as have been various employees. Pat Botts, our president, chief operating officer, has been on committees, in particular the technology committee of economic development in the chamber. John Bowles, who works for us, has been on the economic development of Downtown Business Council and Heart of the City. So we've had opportunities to help economic development in a whole host of ways, primarily through the chamber and then through individual economic development entities since.
Okay. When you look back on your own preparation, education, background, what kind of things in that context have been of most value to you in terms of now working with economic development in Muncie?
Oh gosh. Personally?
Yeah, I guess you could even cite a course. So,
Yeah.
It really is kind of global
Well,
question.
I think with my business degree connected to the fact that I've worked for a business in this community for a long period of time that is very dependent upon the economic nature of the environment. The market or community that a bank operates within is very dependent upon a vibrant community.
Okay.
And over the course of the almost 30 years I've been associated here, we've been through a ton of business cycles,
Right.
and I think I think every time you go through an extreme business cycle, what you get is you get, you know, kind of further confirmation that the only thing that will grow a community and a business in a community over a long period of time is economic growth.
Right.
And so, as a financial institution, I just had this conversation with a group of employees I was speaking to. I can remember when in the early 1980s, we paid 16.78 on a CD, and our mortgage loan rate was 19.5.
Oh, yes.
And so today, you know, I mean, today, you know, a mortgage rate's a third that,
Right.
or less,
Yeah.
or almost a fourth that, between 5 and 5.5, 6, so about a third of that. And you know, our challenge in a financial institution perspective is the fact that if you don't have people who work, or if you don't have people who improve their earnings, or if you have people who lose their jobs, or if you have people if you don't have people coming into the community, our ability to grow revenue is almost nil. And so I think the basic business understanding and of working in a financial institution, in addition to the formal education that is basic economic foundations, it leads you to believe that economic development is very important.
Could you give me some examples of particular economic development initiatives that you've really been involved with in the past few years?
I have been involved with representing the community to potential investors, all the way from site selectors to independent business people. I have been involved. I have not. Well, what I don't know what I've not been involved in. I've been involved in putting together financial packages for people who have come here, and either on a personal basis or on a business basis. Obviously, part of our role as a financial institution is to finance business activities. So I have been involved in putting together packages of financing for folks. My wife Deb's been involved in entertainment as part of a community, social welcoming of recruitment of either employees or in businesses.
Do you tend to get involved in these endeavors more as a bank CEO, or is it also in your role working with the chamber group? Or is it hard to separate one from the other?
It's really hard to separate. I mean, having been born and raised in this community, that's a good and bad thing at times, I guess. But I don't think there's any question that involvement is really it's keyed off of the role I play in the company.
Okay.
And that's compounded because I have a personal stake in the community. I mean, it is my community.
Yeah, right.
So, other than 3 years when I lived up in northern Indiana, I've lived here all my life.
Okay. In your view, looking at, shall we say, successful initiatives, but you can also look at some that may not have been successful, what works in Muncie and what doesn't, as you look at prospecting for economic development successes?
I think that what works is painting a clear picture of the values and the advantages of being in Muncie. When we talk about an economical place to do business, one of the things I like to tell prospective business people is that if I leave in the morning and forget to lock my house, I don't go home and lock it.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's benefit to living in a community and working in a community like ours, where it's easy to go places and get, it's easy to go to Indianapolis or Fort Wayne or Chicago or Cincinnati, yet at the same time, the cost of living here and I don't want to really say simplicity, but
Mhm.
you know, there is a comfort in the community that we have, and I think when we're successful selling our community, you know, it's partly because people are looking for that.
Okay.
You know, they're looking for something that's a little less dramatic or a little less, you know, busy, and I think we can sell that. I think what works well is when we're able to get people who live in the community to communicate with those that are looking to live or work in the community.
Okay. As you reflect back on the same thing, what things don't work?
I think glitzy kind of PR materials, I think are very neutral. You know, I don't know that they
Okay.
don't work, but
Right.
you know, I think making out the community to be something it's not doesn't. I mean, you can't sell something unless, at least not the second time,
Right.
if you're not honest about what it is or what it isn't.
Okay.
So I think trying to build or trying to portray the community as something it's not is really the biggest detriment. You know, there's a whole bunch of other economic development issues like land and
Right.
shell buildings
Right.
and all those types of things.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I don't know if that's what you're asking.
No, I am.
about.
No, that's exactly what I was asking. But let me be more specific. I'm just picking a number out of the air here. You can have fewer or more, depending on your view. But what do you think are the three most important things that Muncie has to address in its efforts to further economic development?
I think it has to address the availability of land and facilities.
Okay.
And those are different things.
Right.
But I'm not sure they're different in terms of one of the top three things. You know, I kind of put them together.
Okay.
I think we
Okay.
have to address. I think we have to address the image and perception of what people have, what people think about this community.
Okay.
And I think we need to improve the infrastructure.
Okay. Those are good. What do you think the image is?
I think the image is of a Midwestern city that is a little bit bumpkinish, and that's a highly technical term. But I think there's an image of unsophistication.
Okay.
I think there's a little bit of an image of contentiousness between the university, the city, the administration, and business.
Uh-huh.
There's maybe a sense of a lack of consensus at times on what's really important.
Okay. You mentioned land and facilities, and I know you know a good deal about that, but talk a bit more about that. I mean, when someone comes to look at a Muncie, Indiana as a place where you might bring a business, and you talk about land and facilities, well, what do you really mean by land and facilities?
Well, I think if somebody's going to come in and build a 300,000 square foot factory or office building,
Right.
or whatever, they're going to have demands. I mean, they're going to have, depending upon the type of business, they're going to want accessibility to transportation.
Okay.
They're going to want utilities.
Yeah, right.
They're going to want either a shovel-ready site,
Okay.
or they're going to want a site that they can move into.
Okay.
So I think from a land standpoint, I think there's a need for, we have a tech park, and we have an ag park, and we have a
Right.
business park, a couple of them.
Right.
But having vacant land that is ready to be used is important. I think from a facility standpoint, you know, there are always going to be some vacant buildings, plants, office buildings that can be used. But it's important to have, for instance, the shell buildings, and you know, right now, actually this spring we should be starting our I think it's our 6th shell building, and we're also trying to finish plans for a shell building that is a tech building, and a green building.
I know, Dan Allen was telling me about that.
Yeah, and I think those are important because there are economic development opportunities where, you know, the developer or the company are working on specific time frames, or they have a specific need for the development of a site, that if you don't have, you know, if you don't have space available, you're not even considered.
Oh, okay.
So I think that making that cut is really important.
Yeah. When you think of obstacles that you've encountered, you've kind of touched on a couple, but I want to put this in the appropriate context. When you think of obstacles you've encountered in the process of working in Muncie area economic development, what are some of those that you would cite? If you met somebody on the street and he said, you know, I really kind of like Muncie, pretty good place, but you know, there may be some obstacles here, because you get that word from a number of people who look at Muncie and say, well, yeah, there's some things here that are good, but on the other hand, there are some obstacles. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but the one I have been able to get from people I've interviewed so far is, well, there still is a kind of old union mentality in Muncie.
Yeah, I think certain skilled workforce issues, I think, are a little bit of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think as silly as this sounds, our proximity to Indianapolis plays a little bit of a role sometimes as an obstacle, because because you have people who say, well, if I'm going to be that close to the big city, then I ought to be at the big city. And beyond that, you have people who, I mean, you've seen that at the university. There are some people who don't want to live in Muncie, Indiana, for a whole host of reasons.
They want to live in Fishers.
Yeah, they want to live in Fishers. But I think that's an obstacle. I think the whole community support for economic development at times can be an obstacle, because I think I think private interest sometimes can be a barrier.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I think that's I think that can be a barrier. And I would go as far as to say our local government can be a challenge.
Okay.
I think there is some very contentious relationships there from time to time. I want to say this right, because who knows who could hear this. I think that I think that at times we don't have elected officials that have all the skills and capabilities that probably the job demands. And I think part of that is because people who are capable and competent really don't want to involve themselves in that way.
I think you're right. As you think of Muncie right now, in the late winter of 2008, do you think that Muncie as a community is a hard or easy sell to prospects for economic development?
Yes.
Both.
Both. I mean, I think it does vary. I think with as competitive as the world is today, I think there are things that make Muncie, Indiana very easy to sell.
Okay.
I think the fact that you do have access to transportation, the fact that you have a wonderful university and a wonderful health system here, I think the fact that you are centrally located, I think the fact that it's cheap to operate a business here, both wages, facilities, utilities, I think those are easy things to sell.
Okay.
I think what's hard to sell
Yeah.
is some are selling over some of the image barriers
Okay.
that we've talked about.
And since you did grow up here, and I've been around here a long time,
Yes, you have.
it takes a long time to change an image. And I feel that way about the university too. I mean, the university is a far different place than it was 50 years ago, 30 years ago. But yet, in the eyes of a lot of even the citizens of Indiana, it's still Ball State Teachers College. And so I often used to say to John Worthen, how long does it take to get people to change their perception? He said, well, yeah. And you feel that's the same way about the perception of Muncie. So
I think so, and I think that's probably one of the things that I think my experience over the last 4 years with the chamber and in economic development, I think there was really good headway being made.
Mhm.
I think there was there was success that we had. There has been success, and I think that breeds confidence and it breeds a little bit of success. I think probably we haven't told the story as much as
Right.
we need to.
right.
But I think, I think that it does take a long time, and I think there are several initiatives that are taking place right now that I think could really continue to help that image. And I think I made these comments at the annual meeting of the chamber
Right.
in October when we changed officers. And I said it, I repeated again 2 weeks ago at our vision breakfast.
Mhm.
If we don't tell people what good we have here, nobody.
Right.
If we don't toot our own horn, nobody's going to do it. I
Mhm.
guarantee you that. And so that's why it's so important, I think, to have positive support in the paper, to present a unified consensus to economic development that says,
Okay.
we're all in this together and we're all working together, because I think that presents the type of image.
Mhm.
People want to be with winners.
Yeah,
You
no
know
question. Oh, sure. Have you played either in your role as the bank CEO or with your involvement with the chamber some role in helping to identify prospects? Or is that just something that you don't get involved with?
No, I really haven't. I really haven't. We're working with a group right now that I don't know if Steve Anderson talked any about it or not, but we're working in a group right now to try to identify a niche, to try to identify what kind of transformational change
Yeah, yep.
can we identify
Yeah.
that will cut a new path,
Yeah.
that will
Yeah.
allow Muncie and Delaware County to be recognized as
Yeah.
having something other people don't.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I am too.
And I think that's close to maybe identifying that, but
Okay.
I know the economic development team has targeted things like with our Asian strategy,
Yeah, right.
and have targeted BioLife or bioscience.
Right. Yep.
So I think Vision 2011 has some very specific targets in it.
Mhm.
And I participated in those focus groups to help determine those. But personally, I've not gone
Okay.
out to recruit any specific kind of business or in it.
That generally would be handled more by chamber staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I happen to think Energize ECI has done. I think that's the real role they play. I mean, the role that Roy and
right.
ECI, play is simply to create is to get organizations in a pipeline.
Right.
I mean, they're a marketing arm. That is
Yeah.
what they do, and it is whether it's a manufacturer, whether it's a technology company, whatever. Their job is to help create and bring opportunities to us. And then I think it's the professionals. I mean, economic development, at least my perspective of it, is that it's a very scientific, very involved, technical process. It isn't just simply calling up Joe and saying, you know, you ought to bring a plant here. It just doesn't work that way when you talk about tax abatements and state incentive programs and infrastructure development and all that kind of stuff.
When a corporation or a business considers closing a local facility, what kinds of local conditions do they cite for doing this? And why might somebody say, okay, we've been here, but we're not going to stay here, and here's why?
Oh, I think certainly competition is probably, and like that manifests its way into company performance or plant performance or product performance. I think downsizing, consolidation, cost cutting is a reason. I think those are by far the most, I mean, other than the traditional just going out of business, I think that's really the only reason that either there's a, you know, the larger company is looking for ways to be more effective or more efficient, or, you know, a product's now being manufactured someplace else, or, and I really think, I mean, in the case of I think in the case of Warner, I think the real issue is that it's so costly for them to produce something out of that plant that it just doesn't make sense for them. And that goes back to the consolidation.
Well, you know, that's interesting historical perspective, again, from somebody who's been, two people have been around here for a while, because you have this kind of person on the street view that a new company should come here, look at a plant like Gear, come into Gear and retrofit it. Now, you know, and I know, that it doesn't take an awful lot of sense to figure out that there aren't very many automobile companies or parts, people interested in producing parts for automobiles that are going to do something like that. And yet there's a kind of person on the street perspective in this town that, well, that's obviously what you can do because that's kind of easy, when it isn't easy. I mean, what Honda wants to do is build a brand spanking new high-tech plant in Greensburg, or, you know.
It's cheap.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Yeah. Well, and I think you touched on something there, Warren, though, that is relevant, and that is that just look at what's happened in manufacturing. I mean, you know, you're looking at things from a historical perspective.
Sure. Yeah.
But you know, look at the you know, something as simple as just-in-time, you know, manufacturing versus inventory manufacturing. You know, look at machines. I've got a buddy who runs a tool and die company, D1 Mold and Tool out in Daleville, and you know, he went into business 6 years ago. Very tough time to go into that business, but I'm always amazed when I go out there and look at their CNC machines and see how they build things and how they make things, and he competes every day, which every day. And so, I mean, just the whole, you know, what it takes to build something today versus what it took to build something 20 years ago is just different.
What's a CNC machine?
It is it's a mechanized cutting machine.
Oh, okay.
And so what he makes are dies and tools, and so he'll take a piece of steel, maybe that thick and this big, and, you know, put it in a machine, and then they'll program into the machine what they need cut on it, and it'll create the die that then parts can be cast with. It's, I know nothing. I know very little about that. That's why it's always interesting to go out and see Tony, because it's fascinating.
Well, I was smiling because when I first came to Muncie in the late 1960s, somebody described Muncie as nothing but a big tool and die shop. That was the expertise of an awful lot of people who were doing that at that time.
Well, when you think about it, all of those places that built gears had to have molds and tools to do that with. So I lived in Warsaw for 3 years, and it's the same thing. You've got the orthopedic companies up there, and you've got all these small manufacturing companies that manufacture parts that then go to the orthopedic companies to be finished. It's fascinating. It's the same thing as tool and die here for automotive.
Here's your hip.
Yeah, exactly.
Regional question. What role do you think that Muncie should play as a center for larger East Central Indiana economic development?
I think we need to be the lead dog.
Okay.
I mean, I think, you know, I think if take East Central Indiana, which can be defined a lot of different ways.
Right.
But, you know, when you compare Delaware County to
Right.
Randolph, Jay, Blackford, Henry, Grant, you know, none of them have a university like
Right.
we have,
Right.
like we have. None of them have
Right.
healthcare the way we have it. So we have to be kind of the center of that. I think
Okay.
we could help ourselves a lot by not always thinking of ourselves
Right.
as that lead dog.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's one of the things that I hope that we resist in terms of a change of leadership in the mayor's office, that we do think about the fact that, you know, what's good for Muncie or Delaware County, you know, is sometimes what goes on in Randolph, Blackford, Jay,
Right.
and so I think, you know, Grant County has a couple of universities
Right.
that are niche and doing
Yeah.
very
Right.
well, you know, but I think we need to be a lead there, because we will benefit from
Mm-hmm.
success that the other counties have.
Do you think that that initiative, let's say in the past few years, has been enhanced by things like Energize ECI?
I think definitely.
Okay.
You know, I think that there's always been an informal,
Yeah.
cool relationship between economic
Yeah.
development people in each county, because
Right.
let's face it, I mean, you want to win.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you know, when a prospect comes and says, I'm gonna locate a Honda plant,
Yeah.
you know, we're all for regional economic development, but make no mistake, you want it in your yard and
Yeah.
not your neighbor's.
No, that's true. You're
So
right,
I think
agree.
there's this level of competition. I think that's one of the things Roy has done. I think
Yeah.
done a pretty good job
Yeah.
of. Is he's kind of helped people to see that,
Mhm.
you know, we all will benefit some, and that's what he does. Basically, tease it up for everybody, and
yeah.
then
Right.
you know, whoever can hit it the farthest wins. But
Yeah, he mentioned to me during our interview that he was trying to be certain, to make certain, I guess more accurately, that the term regionalism wasn't a negative, but rather a positive. And I think that's a real challenge.
there's no question about
Yeah.
that. I mean, you know, you've been around here long enough to
Yeah,
know
right.
that Muncie and Anderson and Marion
Yeah.
don't like each other. You know, and that goes.
It's not just on the basketball court.
Exactly,
Yeah,
but
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
but that's still part of it.
Sure it is. Yeah, no, it is, yeah.
Frankly, I mean,
Yep.
it's still part of it that, you know, there's nobody you'd
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
you'd rather beat
Yeah.
or win over
Mhm.
than an Anderson, Marion, Richmond.
Yeah,
you know, and it
so-
goes
yeah.
back to some
North Central
very
Conference,
elementary
sure.
stuff.
Yeah, it's North Central Conference rivalries.
Right?
What role do you think that the newspaper should play in economic development?
You know, that's a really hard question for me to answer, because I don't understand the media business
Okay.
very well. I do think it plays a role. I think it plays a role of being honest and open and complete in its description of economic development activities, both good and bad.
Mhm.
I think the newspaper has, although decreasing, I think they have an influence on
Mhm.
how people perceive the community.
Okay.
And so I think there is a responsibility, frankly,
Mhm.
that the newspaper needs to understand that. And I think that there is some level of responsibility to help paint the community in a way that helps it be perceived for what it is.
Okay.
And again, that's a fine line. I understand it's a fine line from
Well,
a
I mean,
news standpoint.
keep in mind, you're the only person I've interviewed who, in recent months, has taken the time to write an op-ed piece challenging the newspaper's position on something that had to do with the chamber.
Well, and I think if you really look at that, I mean, the fact of the matter is, it was irresponsible journalism on their part. They never talked to us.
Mhm.
And that's irresponsible. And
Yeah.
they've admitted that.
Okay.
You know, they've come to the chamber and
Yeah.
they said, you know, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
You know, bitey way they said it, I think didn't need to be said. But that's style,
Right.
you know. But you don't want to get me started about Greg Fallon and Doug Zaleski when you talk about Ball State either, because I think there is this desire at times to be you know, really big city journalists, and you know, I think at times that's overplayed. The article this morning, I think, was a good example. That article was about economic development. It wasn't about fireworks.
Right.
The headline talked about fireworks.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not really sure if that was an attempt to be less critical of economic development, which it could have been. Because I think Julie Metzger's doing it. I think she's done a very good job of trying to create a positive culture in the paper. I mean, they've done a lot of things in the newspaper that I think are really attempts to tell the good stories.
Yeah.
So but I don't know on that headline whether that headline was purposely meant to draw attention away from and minimize the economic development content, or whether it was an attempt to pick something that might excite people.
Yeah. Symbolically.
To get them symbolically to get them to read the rest. I don't know.
Well, you're right. I mean, headline writers often are not the people who are doing the story. I mean, they're writing the heads, and so you pick something out of the story and try to get the head to be more dramatic. And I think that's probably a good observation. Big topic, near and dear to both of our hearts. What do you think the proper role is for Ball State University in economic development?
I think they absolutely should be a lead.
Okay.
I believe wholeheartedly that that they should, and this isn't the right terminology, but I think putting their money where their mouth is very important.
Okay.
I think if they're gonna, if we, as I'm very pleased to be part of the university.
Sure.
If we're gonna put our foot forward as an immersive learning, technologically creative and engaging university, a state-of-the-art teachers college, then we ought to pay attention to our own community.
Okay.
And I believe that the impact of that, it could be very substantial economic development. I believe that if there was a very, and this isn't assuming there isn't, okay?
Right, yeah.
But if there was a complete engagement of the Teachers College in the Muncie Community Schools, there's a chance that we could help the Muncie Community Schools overcome many of the challenges it has and be recognized as a model for education in the 21st century. I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the application of technology, there are so many awesome things being done in our university.
True.
Why would we not want to extend that in practice to the community that the university sits in? Because ultimately, our community could be a detriment to Ball State University.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not so sure it isn't from time to time.
Well, you know, I'm going to pick up on that a little bit just because it's the two of us. I think that it's easier for the people in the technological areas at Ball State to do a lot of outreach because a lot of them as individual faculty have been doing it for a long time. I mean, I currently have an office over in CICS, and so I'm much more cognizant of that than I might have been a couple of years ago. Teachers College, I think there still is a fair amount of hidebound academic traditionalism in the TC, and so they tend to act more like traditional faculty than the faculty do in an area like TCOM or CICS or all these digital media programs we've got all over the place. I mean, that's kind of an answer to your question. I mean, I think there is a lot of enthusiasm on the part of the technological arm of the institution, and even to some degree in some areas of the College of Business, to do more outreach than might have been the case 20 years ago.
Agreed totally. And I think that's the exciting thing to me. The exciting thing to me is that, and you know, say what you will about Joanne, I sure don't agree or appreciate the way she does some things, but I will tell you some things that I think are absolutely spot on is the fact that she's not afraid to tell the world how good we are here.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's awesing. And that
I
isn't
agree.
just the people here now. I mean, that goes back to the work that you did, that Bev did, that various professors have done over a period of time. I mean, you know, and I think that's awesome. And so I believe that it's just really critical for the university to influence the community in which it's sitting. And I think that I think some of the short result of that could be an even greater divide between the university and the city. But I think in the long run, it could be just so much better enhanced, and it goes all the way through sports and attendance, and I mean it just goes through all those things. But I see it happening. Just sitting. Last Thursday night and Friday we had the National Campaign Committee I'm on for the next campaign.
Right.
And on Thursday night we had dinner in the Letterman foyer, Letterman building foyer, and Tom Taylor had 4 students come talk about scholarships because it is awesome. I mean, when you see these young people and how talented they are, it's cool. I mean, it is.
Couldn't agree more.
And I think something that before we leave this subject, something I think we also don't want to overlook is the role that Ivy Tech can play.
Well, that was my next question.
I think Ivy Tech, has a very distinct and purposeful place in economic development. And I think, I'm really happy that the university and the whole community college concept, I guess, really, it's not just Ball State, but the community college concept, I think makes a lot of sense. Now, unfortunately, you talk about time. I mean, I got into Ball State on the fog test, I mean, my check cleared, my parents' check cleared, and I could fog a mirror. But, what people don't understand today is that it's harder to get into Ball State than it is IU or Purdue. And to that extent, I think particularly communities like Muncie, I think Ivy Tech plays a very critical role of getting people. Now, you think about the continuum here. If you had a K through 12 reputation of technology-driven, latest educational techniques from an academic standpoint, and you were attracting, top-line teachers in K through 12, and in our community, if you just take our community, you've got this obvious with 60% free or reduced lunch in the Muncie community schools. You've got a big blob of those kids that are going to stop at high school. So the better we can make their education in that K through 12, the more technically we can get them ready, whether they're going to be mechanics or computer programmers or whatever, the better. Then you've got that next glut of people who are looking at advanced technical training. The medical techs, the advanced technology for automotive. The trades, plumbing, electrician. I think there's this important role that Ivy Tech can play in that, in addition to supporting some general study education, helping students get ready to attend whatever university, 4-year school they want to attend. And then you've got a state-of-the-art university that's attracting people from all over the country. I'm all for that, frankly, because I think that in the long run has a huge impact on the image and the opportunity for future success. You got some people from right here in Muncie, Indiana, that are going to benefit over time by going through all those steps. You got others who aren't. They're going to go on to Ball State or go on to IU or Purdue or wherever they go. You're always going to have those. Aren't the people you're worried about.
No, I couldn't agree more. My only comment on the way the community college was birthed was the manner in which it was brought into being. I started out teaching at a community college back in the mid-'60s in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Even though I have a private university liberal arts college background, no one is more enthusiastic about the mission of a community college in any community than I am, because they can do things rapidly. They can respond to the needs of companies coming to town in terms of specific training. They do much more rapidly, I might add, than a Ball State can, because in any big mid-sized public university, to say nothing of a major research institution like an IU or Purdue, they just can't turn it around that quick. But the community colleges, for years and years and years throughout the United States have prided themselves on the fact that they can put these programs in fast and meet the specific needs of
See, I
individual
don't have any
employers.
of the history of how it was
Well,
birthed or anything else. So.
Well, it was done, as kind of Stan Jones telling me, well, we're not trying to create a community college system in Indiana, and 2 years later you had one. So, I mean, it was done without a lot of public debate, without a lot of public discussion, even in the General Assembly. But we've got it, and I think it offers any community that has what is now Community College of Indiana programs to offer an incredible opportunity for a student who graduates from high school and really isn't sure what he or she wants to do. And what the community college then becomes is, to be even blunt, if I may, oh, I think I'll take my history and my English, and maybe I'll take some skills-oriented
My
courses.
son's there. He went to Purdue for a year and a half.
I couldn't agree
He
more.
wasn't ready.
Yep.
He's not dumb,
Yep.
but
Right.
that kind of curriculum, as I think he found out, and
Yeah.
ultimately we found out, really wasn't what he was. It's probably not what he's cut out for,
Right.
but he certainly wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
So he's working full time at Teal Automotive in Dunkirk. He takes 2 night classes right now. He's got a speech class and he's got an electronics class.
Perfect.
And exactly. He's going to
Yeah.
find out what he wants to do, and I'm thrilled.
And you want to know what the key is, which I learned very rapidly back in the 60s, when for a semester's 16 hours worth of courses, it costs $50 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Cost. Because you get so concerned about the escalating cost of higher education, whether it's private or public, and what the community colleges have always been able to do thus far is to hold the cost down to a reasonable amount of money. And that's really critical for the kind of people we're talking about here.
But you know what's interesting, though, is
Yeah.
all the time you spent at Ball State, and I don't know that you agree with this. This is my perception. Ball State competed for the students with Ivy Tech for a long, long time.
Oh, sure, sure.
And I think what's happening
Yeah.
is now
Yeah.
that's changed.
Yeah, we began to change it, and I'm part of that.
But I don't
Yeah,
think
you're
that.
right.
I think that's good. I think
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah,
I think that's completely great.
yeah, we did that.
Because you did, and
Yeah.
because what that does is it attracts
Yeah.
a different level
It does.
of student to the university.
Yeah.
And let's face it, the quality of education you're going to get at Ball State University, as opposed to name any school that's perceived as much better,
Right.
or even a school that's perceived as not near as good,
Yeah.
is not going to vary that much.
True.
Now, there are things that vary.
Right.
Okay, I mean, there
Yeah.
are things like exposure to other students,
Mhm.
exposure to supplemental activities.
Right.
Now, that all goes into education, and I
Yeah.
do understand.
Right.
But when you talk about the curriculum of the accounting department at Ball State versus the curriculum of the accounting department at an Ivy League school, I will
Right.
tell you, I don't think it's much different. That's my perspective.
Well, it's different in terms of probably the overall quality of the students you have there.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
The competition's
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
The
yeah.
opportunity to get
Yeah.
exposed to different people's
Mhm,
different. I mean, I will
Sure.
admit to that.
Yeah.
But I'm talking debits and credits and cost accounting. I'm not talking about.
Right.
I'm not talking about applying it, or I'm talking about just
Yeah.
learning the basics of doing it. I don't think it's that different. So I think that's an exciting thing as you look at,
Yeah.
18,000 or 17,100 students at Boston. I think that's fine.
Mhm.
I was part of the letter writing campaign at the College of Business, where we went out and specifically made an effort to try to attract, more presidential scholars
Yeah.
and those aren't huge number of differences. But if you're getting twice as many, and even if it's from 10 to 20 presidential scholars, those things start to make a difference over time. And I think that's what we've done, and I think that's terrific. But I think that is difficult to get done if you don't have the support of an Ivy Tech. That can certainly be a feeder, but it's a feeder of kids who have now proven that they can academically succeed.
Yeah, I mean, what Ball State has done, and then we began by design doing it back in the mid-90s, is to try to differentiate itself, especially from Indiana State, I don't mind saying for the record, to the point where we can say we are much more selective than we were a decade ago, to say nothing of 3 decades ago. When I came to Ball State in the late 1960s, we had what we called deferred admission on the quarter system, and if you didn't get in the fall, you got it in the winter. If you didn't get in the winter, you got it in the spring. Well, by the 90s, it was pretty apparent that we had to do something to differentiate ourselves from some other institutions. And so we went down this path, which Ball State has continued to go down. And I think, for the greater glory of the institution, it's probably a good idea to do that.
I would agree. I totally agree.
So we talked about Ivy Tech. Well, let me just touch on a couple of others and get your comments. The next one's pretty obvious, but let me ask it anyway for the record. What do you think the appropriate role is for the Chamber of Commerce in economic development in a community like Muncie?
Yeah, I think that's a much more complex question than what it might sound.
Okay.
You know, I think it depends on what the community wants out of the Chamber of Commerce.
All right.
And what the members want out of the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
You know, I think the setup that we have here is fairly unique in that our chamber, you know, there are traditional chamber welcome wagon,
Right. Yeah.
maybe advocacy, certainly networking roles that are standard and maybe more traditional in chamber activities. I think part of what's happened is that the technical aspect of economic development has gone the same way that manufacturing and service businesses have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the specialization and the complication of how do you attract a business
Right.
has become much more structured, much more, much more purposeful or you know, just more complex.
Yeah.
And so I think that means that there needs to be a professional organization that helps make that happen. And I think the setup we have makes a lot of sense. But it is different because a lot of the effort that members of or a lot of staff time and effort in our chamber is spent doing economic development that would not be traditional functions. I think that's one of the things in the article that irritated me a little bit.
Right.
I think they took an assumptive position of what they thought a chamber of commerce ought to be, and I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's not okay, you know, in an editorial where you didn't provide or didn't even bother to get the input from the organization that you were opinionating. It's not even a word.
Okay. Do you think in a community at this point in time, like Muncie, Indiana, that the mayor has to be one of the community leaders in economic development?
I don't think there's any question.
Okay.
I think without presenting the image that the mayor, who is the chief executive of the city, understands business is crazy.
Okay.
I think that's very detrimental to economic development.
Okay.
I don't think they don't have to be a business person, they don't have to have a business degree, but they need to be able to present the image of support for the business environment, because I think otherwise, I think that's a real detriment to economic development.
Well, when I asked former Mayor Cannon what he knew about economic development before he became mayor, I mean, you know what he said, almost nothing. I said, so then during the 3 terms you served as mayor, you learned an awful lot about economic development, to the point that you could say to me, when I asked you what is the most important responsibility of a mayor of Muncie, and you responded economic development. Obviously, you learned an awful lot during that period of time, and he was very candid about saying, yeah.
I mean, a city has to enhance its tax base.
Right.
I mean, if you just think about it, think about the university.
Yeah.
An organization. Think about a bank.
Yeah.
You know, if we don't increase our opportunity to generate revenue over time, you cannot survive.
Yeah.
You either have to raise prices,
Right.
or reduce costs.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, you can do all of those things a little bit. But if we don't increase the tax base either through assessment or through new businesses, there's no place to go.
Yeah.
Or where you go are wheel taxes and and
Yeah.
which I happen to think we ought to do.
Me too.
But that's but what politician, and that's the problem. I think
Yeah.
the problem is, in a lot of cases, it's all about getting reelected, and I mean, I went to the third House session a month and a half ago, and I tell you, Sue Arrington, some of the group, the concerned taxpayer group, got a hold of her,
Mhm.
not literally, but I was sitting there, and she was standing, and they were absolute bulldogs, and I got to thinking, why is somebody going to submit themselves to that? I mean, they were rude to her. They were threatening to her that if you don't change something, then you're not going to get elected and reelected. And to her credit, she said, "I'm going to do the best I can for the community."
Yeah.
And, she handled herself, I thought, really, really well, but it was very unfair. And somebody's got to stand up and be able.
Yeah.
I think that's my opinion of Mitch Daniels.
Yeah.
Again, I don't agree with all the things he's done or how he's done it. But he hasn't been afraid to try to do
No,
things.
he's got guts.
And to that extent, you know
Yeah.
what? Okay, I'm okay with
Yeah.
that. I'm okay with that, and I think that's where a mayor has to show, some backbone to be able to
Mhm.
say, this is important, and it's a big part of where I was going with the wheel tax, though,
Yeah.
was that none of the political base is warmed up to that effect because it's a tax.
Yeah.
You're talking $20 a car.
Yeah, I know.
$25 a car. Now, I fully admit I'm in a different position than a lot of people. So
Sure.
but boy, somebody who can't afford $20 as a wheel tax can't afford
Yeah.
to fix 3 flat tires
Yeah, right.
and a bent rim a year either.
That's right.
I mean,
Well, and you're also dealing with a major image problem. I mean, my son, John, lives in Madison, Wisconsin, and I mean, they pay higher taxes than we do, but they get return for their dollar in recreation, in streets, and all kinds of things like that. And you come down here, and if you just think of people who come to visit you from out of Muncie, and the first thing that they just rail against is the dreadful condition of the streets. You talk about image problems. I mean, that's probably the most significant we got.
so does Indianapolis.
Yeah, exactly. Sure, same thing.
But I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Now the problem is there's never going to be enough money
Yeah.
to fix the roads.
No.
Under the current structure.
No.
Period.
Yeah, it just can't happen.
It cannot happen.
Well, those are all the formal questions I have, and at the end of my interviews, I always give my interviewees an opportunity to step back and reflect and add anything that we might not have covered, or to just simply, for the record, put in anything you might wish.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of stuff.
Okay.
I believe that economic development very much has to be purposeful. I think it has to be professionally done, and more, as importantly as anything, people have to work together to get it done. And that probably is an image of our community at times that is negative, is consensus or collaborative efforts, particularly amongst the public institutions, and by that I mean the university,
Right.
the hospital, the city government, county government, sanitary district, the trustees,
Right.
you read about fire protection
Right,
between the
yeah.
trustees and the city. I
Right,
mean,
yeah.
those are things that tend to dominate people's consciousness at
Sure.
times, and not the good things.
Mhm.
And there is collaboration. It's not that there
Yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
There is.
Well, I think there's a lot more than the average person on the street thinks that there is.
Can you imagine Muncie, Indiana without Ball State University or Cardinal Health System?
Well, I'm going to pick up on that for a minute, because when you were talking about the relationship between the university and the community, the larger community, it occurred to me, as I've said to several people I've interviewed, there's something that comes with all of a sudden finding yourself to be the largest employer in a community. I mean, when I came here in the late 1960s, obviously the big automobile plants and the UAW jobs were the big guns. I mean, if somebody had said to me in 1966, 67, 68, you know, in 2008, the largest employer is going to be Ball State University, I would have thought you were nuts. Now, all of a sudden, you've got Ball State, Cardinal Health System, and then you've got
By
by
the two
far,
largest.
and then you drop down to a Sallie Mae and the Walmart stores
City
and
schools.
yeah, the school system. Well, that really wasn't even something anybody would have contemplated back in the late 1960s. Well, now the university is the big gorilla when it comes to employing people in this community. And I think there is something to say for a responsibility that comes to you as a result of being the largest employer.
I think the thing about the town and gown relationship that I see, and like I said, you know, I'm all pro Ball State.
Yeah, right.
I think the thing that I just wish at times, and I don't think you could ever avoid this as a university, because it's woven into the fabric.
Right.
There's a certain level of arrogance that,
Mhm.
that the university has. And when I say what I did about, can you imagine this community without
Right.
the university? I'm very sincere when I say that.
Right.
What I would rather, you know, what you don't want is the university saying, can you imagine what this city would be without us here?
Yeah, right.
And many times, that's kind of what comes across.
Yeah.
You know, many times I think that's kind of what comes through. And, you know, if you're the mayor, or if you're a city council or county council person, you know, I think you tend to want to be careful and want to protect the non-university.
Yeah.
And in and of
Sure.
itself, that
That's right.
creates this kind of
Yeah.
friction. I mean, hell, Oxford has it, Bloomington has it. I mean, everybody's got it. Muncie's not
Yeah.
unique to that
Yeah.
extent, but
Yeah.
that's why I go back to, I think the role that Ball State can play in our community is almost covert to economic development.
Mhm.
You know, really, it's almost extending what they do into
Mhm.
making the community better.
Yeah.
And in and of itself, it'll make it easier to attract professors.
Oh, sure.
It'll make it,
Yeah.
I mean, all those things
Yeah.
go together.
Yeah.
It's a chicken or the egg,
Yeah.
admittedly. But it
Yeah.
never gets done if you
Yeah.
don't talk about it and work at it.
But you see, my feeling's always been that if there are things the community specifically asks the university for, most of the time it gets done.
Sure.
It might not get done directly, but it gets done indirectly.
Most of the time, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah. It's just the public perception is that sometimes it doesn't get done.
Exactly. And that's because the newspaper writes about it, or that's because a councilman
Yeah.
or a mayor makes statements that are printed in the newspaper
Yeah.
that are out of context or aren't, or is only part of the story.
Yeah.
But that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't change that.
Mhm.
You can't eliminate that kind of thing completely, but I think a conscious effort to be able to say, we
Yeah.
gotta watch that.
Yeah.
Because it does have a bearing on how people perceive a community, a relationship, a university, a
Mhm.
county. You know, I think those things are all relevant.
Yeah.
You know, but that's just my opinion, and it comes from somebody
Mhm.
who's been here for a pretty long time.
Yeah, right.
And works in a business that's very dependent upon the community doing well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're acquiring a
Yep.
bank in Mishawaka.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the reason we're acquiring that bank is because our ability to be successful is very limited in the
Mhm.
markets in which we serve.
Yeah.
We've gotta grow our markets, and we gotta
Yep.
get into markets that are more vibrant. And in
Mhm.
Elkhart and St. Joseph County, there's 452,000 people. In all the other 5 counties we operate in, there's 350.
Mhm.
So we've gotta get into,
Yeah.
and I'd like nothing better than to be able to say that I can grow my business in Delaware County, but it's
Mhm.
very limited
Yeah.
in today's
True.
market.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome.